Everyone remembers the battleships and the carriers, but there's one ship that did the dirty work in every war America ever fought, and almost no one talks about it. It started as a tiny boat built to kill torpedo boats, and it ended as a stealth warship from the future. Today we're walking the entire bloodline of the American destroyer, from the very first to the very latest. Let's go. In the late 19th century, a terrifying new weapon threatened to upend global naval power. Cheap, fast, steam-powered torpedo boats could slip through the dark and sink a massive battleship with a single blow. To defend the fleet, the Navy needed a dedicated hunter, a vessel quick enough to catch these raiders and armed enough to shred them before they launched. This was the torpedo-boat destroyer, soon shortened to simply destroyer. On February 12, 1903, the Navy commissioned its first USS Bainbridge, designated DD-1. Built in Philadelphia by Neefy and Levy, she was a lean Greyhound. At 250 feet long and displacing just 420 tons, Bainbridge was built for speed rather than protection. Her coal-fired boilers pushed her to 29 knots, and she carried two 3-inch guns, 5 6-pounders, and 2 torpedo tubes. She was the underdog of the battle line, relying on agility and a crew of 75 to survive. World War I demanded a different kind of scale. The threat was no longer isolated raiders, but fleets of German U-boats strangling Allied shipping across the Atlantic. The Navy's answer was the first mass-produced destroyer family, the Flush-Deckers. Characterized by their distinct straight-line hulls and 4 smokestacks, these 4 Pipers became the instantly recognizable face of American industrial might. Between 1917 and 1922, American shipyards worked day and night. They turned out 111 Wickes-class destroyers, quickly followed by 156 of the slightly longer-range Clemson class. At 267 ships in total, this was an armada built to overwhelm the submarine threat through sheer numbers. They could run at 35 knots and carried 12 torpedo tubes. Though many arrived too late for the Great War, their story did not end there. Dozens of these surplus vessels were mothballed, only to be pulled from reserve in 1940. Under the Destroyers for Bases deal, 50 of these aging warriors were transferred to Great Britain, thrust back into the front lines of another global conflict. At 03:57 in the morning of December 7, 1941, USS Ward was patrolling the restricted waters just outside Pearl Harbor. She was an aging Wickes-class 4 Piper, manned largely by naval reservists from Minnesota. Her captain, Lieutenant Commander William Outerbridge, had been in command for less than 24 hours. At 0640, the watch spotted a periscope. It was a Japanese midget submarine trying to sneak into the port. Outerbridge ordered the ship to 25 knots. 5 minutes later, Ward opened fire. Gun number 3 scored a direct hit at the waterline, sending the submarine to the bottom. These were the first American shots of World War II, fired over an hour before the air raid began. A surplus destroyer had proven that alertness could turn an old hull into a decisive weapon, but Pearl Harbor was still going to burn, and the Navy now needed ships built for a far bigger war. In 1942, the steel answer to the Pacific's vast distances and brutal air attacks slid into the water. This was the Fletcher class. Designed from the keel up to survive a high-speed, multi-front war, the Fletcher became the most produced destroyer class in American history, with 175 hulls commissioned in just over 2 years. At peak production, Bath Iron Works was delivering a brand new Fletcher-class ship every 17 days. These were not the fragile torpedo boat hunters of the past. At 376 feet long and displacing over 2,000 tons, the Fletcher was a flush-decked powerhouse. A 60,000 horsepower steam plant drove the hull at 38 knots, while 5 5-inch dual-purpose guns and enclosed armored turrets could target enemy warships on the horizon or kamikazes dropping out of the clouds. In the chaotic night battles of the Solomon Islands, like Cape St. George, and under the constant threat of air attack off Okinawa, Fletchers did everything. They screened the fleet's vulnerable aircraft carriers, hunted Japanese submarines, and stood as radar pickets on the outer edges of the fleet, absorbing the brunt of enemy fury. With a crew of nearly 300 sailors, each ship was a self-contained combat unit that could fight through heavy damage and keep firing. By 1945, the Fletcher had defined the modern destroyer, a fast, heavily armed, do-everything escort that the fleet simply could not live without. Instead of trying to reinvent this winning design, naval architects looked for ways to pack even more firepower onto this exact same foundation. The answer arrived in 1943 with the Allen M. Sumner class. By replacing the Fletcher's single mounts with 3 twin 5-inch gun turrets, designers doubled the forward firepower. To counter the extra weight, they added dual rudders. Yet, the Sumner's heavy armament drained its fuel reserves across Pacific distances. In response, the Navy stretched the hull by 14 feet, creating the Gearing class. This extra space allowed for massive fuel tanks, giving the 98 completed Gearings the endurance to traverse oceans. As the last great gun destroyers, both classes survived long past World War II. Through the Cold War, the Fleet Rehabilitation and Modernization Program packed anti-submarine rockets and advanced sonar into these vintage hulls, keeping them active for decades. The Cold War skies left no room for old tactics. Fast Soviet jets and anti-ship missiles meant the era of the surface gun duel was over. To survive, the destroyer had to evolve from a platform of heavy steel and gunpowder into an electronic combat system. The transition anchored on 2 new classes, the Forrest Sherman and the Charles F. Adams. Entering service in 1960, the 29 ships of the Adams class traded traditional gun mounts for Tartar-guided missiles. The destroyer's primary job shifted to fleet air defense. While anti-submarine warfare remained central, the ship was now a high-tech shield, using radar to protect aircraft carriers from supersonic threats. The age of the modern guided missile destroyer had begun. In 1975, the Navy commissioned USS Spruance, a vessel that fundamentally changed what a destroyer could be. Instead of packing the deck with fixed guns, designers created a large, quiet platform powered by gas turbine engines, built to hunt Soviet submarines across the open ocean. Initially, critics mocked the ship, calling her an underarmed Greyhound. But that empty deck space was the point. The roomy hull allowed the Navy to install new vertical launching systems, advanced sonar, and Tomahawk missiles decades later. This physical adaptability was so practical that the exact same hull design became the foundation for the Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruisers. The Spruance proved that a warship's real power lay not in its current weapons, but in its room to grow. That room to grow culminated in 1991 with the commissioning of USS R. Lee Burke, designated DDG-51. Armed with the Aegis combat system, the Burke class became the ultimate fleet shield. It is the most produced large-surface warship since World War II, with production lines remaining active to this day as the reliable, repeatable backbone of the Navy. But the Navy also wanted a radical leap. The Zumwalt class, DDG-1000, was built as an angular, stealth pioneer. Featuring a tumble-home hull and an all-electric integrated power system, it pushed technological limits to their absolute edge to hide from enemy radar. Extreme sophistication brought extreme costs. A program once planned for 32 ships was cut to just 3, turning a designed revolution into a limited, expensive experiment. The modern fleet now operates in this split. On one side stands the proven, mass-produced backbone, on the other, the advanced, low-volume Vanguard. Yet both prove that whether through numbers or technology, the destroyer remains the indispensable workhorse of American sea power. As modern naval warfare shifts to hypersonic missiles and swarming drones, the burden of fleet survival still falls squarely on the destroyer. These adaptable hulls remain the thin line holding the oceans. Subscribe to explore more naval history with us.